I think this is gonna have to be 2 episodes. All right, so the 1958 Ford F100 cab and the Crown Vic firewall and floor are officially joined. I haven't fully metal finished all of the welding yet, but there is no more seam between the F100 cab and the Crown Vic firewall. This process has been no joke. These are all of the templates that I used to cut out steel for this process. The only 2 that weren't part of the firewall are these 2 back here. Those are the rear of the cab. About 1/3 of a sheet of steel. Here's an interior shot real quick, showing you what it looks like from the inside. Hey folks, Casey here, back with a project update on the 1958 Ford F100 Crown Vic swap. This is gonna be a no frills, no fuss episode, just straight getting to work and explaining my process for getting the 1958 Ford F100 cab ready to go onto the Crown Victoria frame. Yes, in the last episode, you saw this cab sitting on the frame. It was literally just sitting there. I completely don't know whether I'm better off using the Ford Crown Victoria floor and firewall, since this is the first one of these swaps that I've done. I really think it's kind of a crapshoot. I would have had to completely rebuild the floor and the firewall of the F100 cab from scratch. If I didn't use the Crown Victoria floor and firewall, I would have also had to make body mounts. This has been a metric shit ton of work to make this thing happen, but here's a glimpse at what's involved. All right, so I don't love the idea of using the Crown Vic floor and firewall, but it does give you a few key benefits, namely easy mounting of the cab, but also because I'm 6'1", it's gonna give me a little bit more leg room. And then it also gives me all of my mounting points for my brake master cylinder and booster, the steering column, the big computer harness wires, the shifter and e-brake cables as they go through the firewall. One aspect that I see though in a lot of these builds is that it doesn't really look finished because you've got this, step that did exist on the 1958 F100 cab. You've got a Crown Vic frame rail and a Crown Vic floor. What a lot of people do is they just wrap this frame with a piece of sheet metal and they actually drop the cab down a little bit lower. In my mind, these look a little too low when the floor is dead level. So I'm going with about a 3/4 of an inch difference, just a little bit taller. So you cut the step out. You have to, there's no way around it. The way this step frame is engineered is actually 2 pieces of steel. They're both little 90-degree bends and they're doubled. This top piece is spot welded to the bottom piece. That's where it gets its strength. When you throw this piece in here, obviously because you brought the step frame further out, now you've got a gap in the middle, about roughly 5 inches, because further out, wider, it needs to be patched back together. So what I did is I actually took a couple pieces of the F100 floor that I had cut out of this thing, threw them in my brake, and I bent them at 90 degrees. And I'm gonna make a little patch to go in there to join these 2 pieces of step frame together. I'm gonna weld them together on my fabrication table and carefully fit them to the F100 cab until I have one piece that can weld in solid, and it's gonna add a lot of strength back to this cab frame. All right, so now with my little extension piece welded in, I can come in with the other half of this puzzle, lay it in place, make a mark across here, and weld these 2 pieces together. So I just drew a couple of tacks so that I could come in and test fit the piece to make sure that I'm not losing my mind here. Now what I'll do is I will remove paint and seam sealer from these 2 corners and fully weld this piece in. All right, and so here we are, fully welded in, fully doubled up, extended step frame. Now the next part of the puzzle here, after I take the cab back off to final weld everything, I'll be able to add a piece of sheet metal in here like this that will basically frame off this step. I'm gonna come in using this radius that comes along the top of this piece and weld plate down to attach the truck cab to the Crown Vic floor, at least on the sides. I wanted to bring you guys in real quick to show you one more thing I had to do to make the Crown Vic floor fit with the F100 cab. I basically notched this section out of the back of the cab. In hindsight, I wish I had taken a little bit more care and not just cut the whole section out. But this is to clear the drive shaft tunnel in the Crown Vic floor. And as you can see, I had to cut up into the piece a little bit. I had to cut the bottom off of this member, which reinforces the back of the cab. And now I'm gonna weld in what's left, and this piece can weld right to the drive shaft tunnel on the Crown Vic floor. Got some butt weld clamps and everything is prepped and ready to weld in, except for that part right there, but we'll get all that from the bottom. And done. The Crown Vic tunnel will weld around here, and then again, all the way around the inside in here. Look, if it wasn't obvious, I'm a big fan of Tony Angelo's YouTube channel, but Tony's got nothing on this trick right here. Say you gotta spray something, you don't wanna get overspray. Pizza box. Pizza box. Also using Seymour's Weld Through Primer. I really like their products, they seem to work good. Good folks. Hashtag not sponsored. Always put your can upside down. Spray it until the liquid stops coming out. Keep your nozzles clear. All right, so I want to give you guys a quick look at what I had to do to the cab and what I had to do to the Crown Vic floor and firewall to make it so that these things would kind of sort of play nice together. So right off the bat, this is the cut I made on the firewall of the truck. I left most of the passenger side because quite frankly, I didn't have interference on most of the passenger side. I left the little kick up into the windshield wiper area, and I cut just above the brake and clutch master cylinders on the stock firewall because all of that's gonna use the Crown Vic stuff. I followed the floor basically right at the pinch weld all the way down the front. Cut out the chassis reinforcement braces. You guys already saw where I kind of remade the step frame. And then I cut the cab all the way to that back brace that runs across the back of the cab. I actually cut that out too to figure out my drive shaft tunnel notch. And then I very poorly seam welded the piece of tubing because it had a flange and everything was spot welded. That's how the top and bottom of this brace existed before. So I've seam welded it to get it back into order. Moving on to the Crown Vic floor and firewall. Right off the bat, I cut out most of the passenger side because again, I'm using most of the passenger side from the F100. I saved this pass through for the main harness to come through. I cut out all the HVAC stuff because there's not really room to run the HVAC stuff in the 57 to 60 F100s. Across the driver's side, I cut it right at the top of the brake master cylinder. It's not perfectly flat. It's got a little bit of a bow to it, as you can see. That was to try to keep as much of the sheet metal intact as possible. But I've kept all of my mountings for my harness, my master cylinder, my steering column, my e-brake cable, and my shifter cable. Coming along to the sides of the floor, obviously you have to cut off the rocker panels because they hang out, down here past the edge of the frame. They're going to get in your way. One thing I did though, is I went ahead where there was cross members and in the front where the body mount was, and I basically boxed those back in. I just sort of seam welded them to the floor, and then I coated everything in weld through primer. Now, this isn't gonna make up for seam sealer. I'm gonna have to get in after I've welded the cab to the floor and seam seal this area as well. But boxing them in gave the floor a little bit more rigidity, and it's gonna be one less place for water intrusion. Similar process on the other side. everything coated in weld through primer as you just saw. All right, and now the cab is attached. So bringing in, the first thing I did is I threw a couple of tacks on this rear cross member where it intersects the tunnel. And then I went in and I bent up a piece of sheet metal that I spot welded to the floor, and then I seam welded up to this step frame. And then I threw in a little vertical piece right there. And then I bent up some little angle plates right there, tacked those into place. I came into the sides and I laid a big monster tack in between the Crown Vic floor and firewall and the F100 cab. And as you guys can see, shaking the cab, I'm shaking the whole chassis. So this thing is attached. I'm sorry it's so hard to show you guys with this thing on the lift. So now, what to do next? My plan is to undo the 6 Crown Vic body mounts, 2 on each side of the front, and there's a couple down here. And I'm gonna pull the cab back off of the frame. The cab, which is now the Crown Vic floor and firewall, and the F100 cab, and fully weld everything together. All right, so I don't want to film the whole process of patching in this Crown Vic floor and firewall to the F100 cab, because I'd like to get it done sometime this year. So what I'll do instead is I'll show you my process for making these patch panels. I'm getting ready to do this panel right here. And what I want this to be is a nice curved piece that comes from the existing F100 cab into the Crown Vic firewall and covers in the hole from the Crown Vic heater box, which I'm not gonna use. So I have to start with my confines and work backwards. I've got a patch that I've already made, metal finished right here. So if I throw my tape in here, I've got 6 1/8 inches for the height of this panel. Figuring out your depth is a little bit harder because it's gonna be a curved piece, but it's gonna be somewhere around 7 inches. So I'm gonna make a piece of poster board that's 6 1/8 inches tall by 8 inches. I'm gonna add an inch, rectangular, whatever. And then I'm gonna come in here and I'm gonna trace with a Sharpie and kind of trim down the poster board from there until I get it close. To the magic of television, I've got a piece right here, ready to go. And so something kind of like that. You know, that gives me plenty of room to seam to the Crown Vic firewall. To seam weld here, and then I'm gonna have to obviously make pieces for the top and the bottom, but we'll get to those later. This is close enough to transfer to metal and start putting some shape into it, and then I can trim it down from there. All right, so I take my pattern, trace it out on steel, and then I can cut it out over on the Beverly shear. Like so. Step over here and kind of take the curve back out of the panel, and we can put some shape into it. Now, I'm lucky enough to have an English wheel with a forming band on it. So that's how I like to form my metal. You could just as easily come in here and start forming this around, you know, a piece of pipe, a welding bottle, you name it. But I'm gonna use the English wheel with the forming band. And I gotta make sure I want the curve to go this way. So it's gotta be down. And I'm just gonna start running this through. Now the forming band, what it does, it's a rubber band. And so it doesn't stretch the metal out, it just rolls it basically over whatever die you choose. And I can already kind of tell after running this through a few times that this isn't going to be nearly enough radius. And that's starting to get a little bit closer to what we ultimately want. So this is close enough to go check. Honestly, that's probably close enough that we could weld that in and end up being happy with it. But I think I'm gonna hit it on the English wheel a little bit more. Once I get it close, I'll go ahead and tack it. So once I get a couple of tacks on it, I can go ahead and sort of form it the rest of the way in place. gonna go a little something like that. All right, folks, that's it for installment 1. Do me a favor and smash that like button for me. These Crown Vic swap project videos haven't been getting much traction. I don't know if the YouTube algorithm doesn't like me or if there's just too many people building these. I don't know that there's that many people going to the effort to try to build these nice. I want this thing to look like a 1958 Ford F-100 when it's done. I don't want it to look like somebody got out the hot glue gun and glued the two vehicles together. Though I suppose there's some of you watching this thinking that's exactly what I just did. Anyway, whatever. In the second installment, you'll see me finish up the back of the cab. We're gonna make the steps to finish off the inside of the cab. We're gonna do a little bit of metal finishing around the inside of the floor to make things look a little bit more put together. And then we're gonna do a seam seal and sort of faux patina job to try to make what's left of the Crown Vic firewall resemble this original 1958 Ford. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know in the comments if you like what you saw in today's video. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Don't forget to smash that like button, and thank you. See you on the next one.